Alrighty, we've got my final biology portfolio here for environmental biology. I've got my introduction page on the top. I, of course, get a lot of content out of this, so I'm just going to get right into it. I also have the 9 outcomes pulled up here, just so that way, as we're going through it, I can remember to talk about how each of these fits into the 9 outcomes. I have a cover page for each section, so we've got the science concepts listed here. I really wanted to make this very scrapbook themed because I really wanted to make this very visually appealing, but I also wanted to make it very visually engaging, and I really wanted to kind of demonstrate how science can be artistic and creative and fulfilling of other areas than just science itself. We've got to start with a quiz response up here, which is explain in your own words why there is typically a higher biomass of producers than the biomass of herbivores in a habitat. This fit well with quantity. It also fit well with patterns and then systems and models for science concepts. I also, just as supplementary, these are not the bulk of the project, but there was a lot of really great National Geographic imagery that I just wanted to draw and just to add to it and just to make it more visually interesting and appealing. So we've got a land and water nutrient exchange going down here, which I felt fit in well as well with like systems and models. So I thought that I would include that there. This is a quiz response for using 2 species of barnacles as an example. Describe the potentially different results of niche splitting and competitive exclusion. This felt well with like theories and hypotheses. It also had to do with specimens, so I thought that fit in well. I also had like a fun, lots of little ocean themed related scrapbookiness, so I put that all in there. This is a media piece that it had to do with patterns in nature, so I didn't think that there was anything more self-explanatory or more that fit this concept better, so we have that included as well. Moving right along, we've got science skills. So I've got my cover page here, and then I have my first quiz response, which is you are put in charge of managing a population of red fox in a grassland. The goal is to increase the number of fox in the population, explain what carrying capacity means, and provide 3 factors that may be limiting the carrying capacity of fox in their grassland habitat. So I've got a little carrying capacity with a K up there. I've got my answer. I thought that this fit science skills well because it had to do with description and explanation. It also had to do with reasoning, had to do with analysis, had to do with problem solving and recording. So I felt that all of those concepts fit that quiz response really well. This is also another image taken from National Geographic that has to do with migratory species. It also has their populations listed. And it has some great little data indicators over here that I thought were really good, so I just wanted to include that as well. Again, just supplemental. This is a quiz response for explain to someone who is new to biology why it is important to identify and classify organisms, including what Carl Linnaeus contributed to the process of classification and why we now have domains in addition to kingdoms. So I included this great picture of herbs and spices because we know that Linnaeus was well known for his great drawing and his recording and also for his identification of so many different species, specifically plants and herbs, so I wanted to include that. I included this fern over there that's been so carefully documented that has their roots and their rhizomes, and so I thought that was a great inclusion. I've got another flower down here. It looks like a lily of some sort. It's got the bulb. I'm not exactly sure what that one is. But then I also have this salt and freshwater fish image as well. So just another example of classification, which I thought fit well with science skills, and it had to do with long-term studies and narration as well. So yeah, that felt really good. And then we've got this quadrat, and so this is a really great example of problem solving, actually, because during this time we realized that we forgot all of our materials, and so we made the sticks for a quadrat on the site, and then when we got home I measured them, so that way we knew exactly how long our quadrat was. We've got some visualization going on over here. We've got some note-taking, which was also part of science skills, so I have all of that included on this media piece here. And then we've got science connections. This is the cover page. I got this little map for science connections, this seaside, because poetry can be connected to science. This is a tear out from National Geographic that says how you can help, and some things that were related to that specific article, and I thought all of those kind of were reflective of science connections. These are 3 different quiz responses that I thought all complemented science connections well. The first one is human cultures often begin with little or no distinction between nature and cultural practices. Provide an example of how Native people of Oregon linked cultural practices with natural phenomena. And I think that this fits well with science-related media. I think it has to do with global issues, science and culture. We've got describe the 3 global practices that are leading to wide-scale soil depletion. This has to do with events, this has to do with institutions, this has to do with science values. And then we have, you have just started gardening and realized that you have sandy soil. What is the advantage of this type of soil, the disadvantage, and what can you do to improve the quality of your topsoil? This has to do with science-related jobs. I think this has to do with science and technology. I think that this has to do with science-related media. This has to do with global issues. So I thought that this quiz response also fit well. And then we've just got some nice flowery imagery to add to the scrapbook theme. This was a quiz response that is explain how we humans have raised our carrying capacity, how this has impacted global life expectancy, infant mortality, fertility rate, and overall growth, and where in the world carrying capacity is still limiting human health. So obviously this has to do with science news, this is science-related media, this is a global issue, this has to do with science and culture. I thought that this was a very topical quiz response for this particular of the outcomes. I've got this image of all of these boats on the water just as a reminder of the fact that there's so much human activity going on a global scale, and I mean this was just a small sample of the whole picture that I took from National Geographic of the amount of boats that are outside of Trieste, and that's just on one sunny day. And so just imagining how the whole world has been impacted by the number of people on the water, and marine biology has been affected by that. This is an indigenous person from South America who is representing his culture and land and is speaking about the impact of deforestation on their land, so I thought that this was good. This is a title of an article that was called Culture Clash, Maya Beekeepers in Mexico See Their Way of Life Threatened by Rapidly Growing Mennonite Farms. So just all kind of wanted to visualize the conversation of humans carrying capacity and the consequences that has had on so many different people. So then we've got going down, so we're now in biology concepts, skills, and connections. So starting with biology concepts, just some nice imagery over here. I took a piece of notes that had to do with classification of monocots and dicots, so I wanted to include that just to solidify the classification portion of general biology concepts. This is a quiz response that says describe the difference between taxonomic classification and functional classification using algae, an oak tree, and a fox as examples. Again, this is great for classification. This has to do with development, this has to do with structure and function, complexity and organization, so I thought that this all fit well. We've got another quiz response that says describe a lichen in detail, including why it is considered to be a community, the taxonomic classification of organisms in a lichen, the 3 major growth forms of lichens, and why lichens may not be found in city environments. All of this had to do with things like homeostasis, this had to do with interdependence, this had to do with evolutionary change, again, unity and diversity, and then of course classification. And then we had some great classification imagery here, just some images I've collected over time that I wanted to include. It felt like the perfect place for them. This is just some more supplemental stuff. This is the image that I had in one of my media pieces where we have this monstera leaf unfurling, and I thought that this was great in kind of visualizing interactions and also change and structure and function of the leaf itself. So I had listed here life stages, physiology, and mechanisms as some very specific ones for this general biology concepts. Got some mushrooms going on. And then I also have the migrating wildebeest because, again, evolutionary change in university and diversity is so critical to understanding their migration process. So I just wanted to include that imagery as well. And then we've got general biology skills, some more great photos. And then, so first thing we've got is the quiz response for you have just arrived at a resort hotel on a tropical island. The 7 basic steps for studying a new environment can be applied here, as well as in more wild locations. List the 7 steps. So we have the 7 steps listed, and then we've got just some nice tropical themes going on, some little hotel sticker over there. So it felt like a good tropical theme. I've got 2 quiz responses on this page. The first one is describe how genetics and experience can impact migration. Include an example organism in your description. Again, this has to do with life stages, and it has to do with interdependence and interactions. And then we have you're at Beverly Beach, Oregon on the coast and see exposed layers of rock as well as marine invertebrate fossils that are fallen out of the rocks on the beach. I included this nice little paint gradient because I thought it reminded me of the stratification that happens in rocks. I've got this global map here just as a reminder of the global change and unity and diversity within our global environment. And then I have another picture from this particular issue that National Geographic put out that had to do with the wildebeest migration again, and it has a diverse gathering, which I thought it just kind of spoke to the unity and diversity of species and within their environment. So I put that there as well. This was a super fun one. So I have my data visualization going on right here, which is great. But then, and then we also have like complexity and organization. So I thought that this felt good. And then I also put this inside of here just as supplementary. But this is called Building a Circular Economy for Plastics and Solutions on the Ground. And this I thought was a really great way that the artist kind of represented the statistics for this and the way that they kind of had an idea of what the future of plastics can look like that would actually be sustainable. And so I thought that that was just a great representation of that, so I wanted to include it as well. Now we've got general biology connections. The image behind it we took when we went to the Portland Japanese Garden, and so I thought that that had to do with lifelong learning plans, and so it kind of visualized that, so I put that as this cover page. And then we've got a quiz response to supplement this that says provide examples of exploration, description, and explanation that you can carry out beyond this course. So I have my answer for that there, and then I have different things that interest me that want me to pursue lifelong learning. We've got the cephalopods going on here and the mollusks, so I thought that that was like a great image. Got this great tropical flower. We've got a daffodil classification right here. So, and then we've got my own personal little clover collection that I have from one of my hikes. So I just wanted to include those things as examples of how I want to continue to pursue lifelong learning within science and biology. This is another support for general biology connections. This is from Lone Fir Cemetery, which has just an amazing array of trees and is a functional arboretum as well as a cemetery. And so I wanted to include this media piece there as well. This was a great example of informal education, museums, libraries, and galaxies in the general biology connection section. And then we have another media piece that is select a habitat, describe the habitat and explain why you've selected the habitat and state how often you're going to return. So this was a media piece for long-term observation in the future, and we go to Laurelhurst Park very frequently just to watch the ducks. So this kind of was a more structured way of that we can be observing them and actually documenting change over time. And this definitely had to do with lifelong learning plans and citizen science, I think. So I wanted to include that. All right, so now we're into environmental biology. So starting with environmental biology concepts, this imagery it felt very applicable because it says the title of this National Geographic article was an icy world and meltdown, and then we have these different images of the polar ice caps, so obviously very topical to environmentally biology concepts, so I thought that that would be a good way to start this section. We've got up here, this was the one piece that I took besides from National Geographic. This was from NASA, this particular graphic, and I used it for one of my media pieces, so I wanted to make sure I appropriately cited that. This was my own personal image, and then so this is just discussing climate change. That particular graphic from NASA is all about how climate changes happen, and it is showing atmospheric carbon and how our current level of atmospheric carbon is at a very unprecedented high compared to years past, even since 1950. So there's that. This is describe how gorse has impacted the Pacific Northwest coastal beaches and what is being done to manage these invasive plants. I have a bunch of random yellow flowers that I pulled from some stickers just to represent gorse because it has a very distinctive yellow flower. Both of these had to do with obviously sustainability and conservation with stewardship. These had to do with climate change and invasive species. So I thought that both of these pieces were supplemental for that. And then I have, this is my organism care plan media that I did that had to do with my fiddle-leaf fig, which is hanging out in the corner right over there. And so I included that because that had to do with sustainability and stewardship, and it had to do with just taking care of nature in general, and I think that that supports the environmental biology concepts overall. So I included that. And now we're into environmental biology skills. And so the first thing that I found, this was again supplemental, but I just thought it was so interesting, so I had to include it. It's called Forensics on the Wing. This was also taken from National Geographic, but this was a field kit that someone uses for when they're studying bird specimens and how they do that and how they take apart bird wings and examine them. And then this is just a list of all of the things that they do and the items that they use, and honestly it felt like a really good example of environmental biology skills and equipment and field techniques. And so even though it's supplemental, it was too good to not leave out. We also have the safety procedures, and so obviously that's an important thing, and safety is the first thing on environmental biology skills, so that felt pretty self-explanatory. And then this right here is, we went to Laurelhurst Park for one of my media pieces, and this was the Select Your Location, Scan, Climate Info, Topography, Biodiversity, Ecology, and Conservation Biology. So those are all those concepts that are produced right there. And that also has to do with being out in the field, with tracking, and with field techniques, and with analysis and self-analysis as well. So I thought that those were all good examples of that. And then a lot of the images on here are pictures that I took for the media piece, so I just kind of included those throughout. And then we've got this cool little butterfly thing going on in the background. So then we've got environmental biology connections, and so this was a very fun little cover that we've got going on here. This is our last section. So we've got a quiz response here. You have made media pieces throughout this course, and at its best, media can promote experiences. From the video about media, describe 2 ways that media can promote experiences. So I have my answer, but then we also have just some more good old Nat Geo supplemental information. These are just, they have such great data visualization, and I think that that's really helped me to appreciate not only data collection, but actually being able to present that to people in a way that can be understood and can be visualized, and you don't need to have a degree in biology in order to grasp these concepts. And I think that that's so important because the amount of information that we have is staggering, but there's still so much that we have to learn, and so finding ways that we can transfer that information to people that's accessible, I think, is going to be of increasing importance. So I included those images as well. From there, we've got another quiz response that is tell a very short story explaining how various flower structures relate to sexual pollination in a lily flower. You can use a labeled illustration or comic with the steps or just words, include in your narrative these structures: petals, sepals, pollen, stamen, stigma / carpel, ovary, ovules, and bee. And I had way too much fun with this story, even though I was supposed to be taking a quiz. And it was great, so Mark said that I should definitely include this, so I did, and I thought that this was a great way of communicating about the environment and matching messages to media, and this can also have to do with science stories as well, so obviously all of that fit in quite well. We've got another quiz response going up here that says distinguish between an oak savanna and an oak woodland. Explain which you think would be cooler, wetter, and have more diverse species, and your reasoning why. And so this was the media piece. And so I have the image of it, which again has to do with drawing and painting in environmental biology connections. We've got this image here for scrapbooking that is, again, drawing and painting. And then you can't see very well, but this is, there's a termite mound that was drawn in Nat Geo in the background. And so that also had to do with just creating visual representations of media, which I think has been such a, I think the focal point of my learning experience for this is how do we actually communicate about these issues. So yeah, that is the content of my portfolio. I think it turned out great. I hope you think it turned out great. But I think that it'll just be such a great way that I can actually like apply this information and that I can present it to other people. This is a piece that I look forward to showing off. So thank you so much for such a great class and such a great experience. I hope that I can take future classes from you guys in the future. Thank you so much.